Welcome back to the Philbrook Football Podcast. This week we have another great slew of football news and scores and predictions for you. I'm joined once again by Doofus McGoofus, Cameron Philbrook, and he's going to read off the scores from this last week for you and get this show on the road.
All right, Doofus McGoofus here. With the scores for you. We'll start, of course, with the Thursday night game. It was a game between the Jets and the Bills, a good AFC East matchup. The New York Jets were able to win 34-21 behind Matt Forte's 2-touchdown game. Tyrod Taylor was also sacked 7 times in that game. And for the Sunday games, we had Redskins and Seattle Seahawks. Redskins win 17-14. Seattle missed 3 field goals, and they also committed 16 penalties. It was just a sloppy game on both sides. There was a lot of mental errors.
Yeah.
Falcons and Cardinals. Falcons came in at 4-3 and dropped this game to Carolina, which was a pivotal game in their division. They lose 17-20. Falcons had a bad running game. They only had 51 yards on 16 carries.
Yeah.
While on the other hand, the Panthers' running game was rolling, had over 200 yards rushing, thanks to Cam Newton and Christian McCaffrey mostly.
Yep, they kind of got their running game going for once, and that's how Carolina did so well in 2015 was the mix of run and pass. So I think going forward, that's probably what they're going to need more of to stay competitive.
You're sitting pretty at 6-3, while the Falcons dropped to 4-4. The Colts and the Texans played as well. Colts won 20-14 thanks to a huge effort from T.Y. Hilton. And without Deshaun Watson, the Texans offense has screeched to a halt. They aren't looking good. I don't think they're in contention for their division anymore.
Yeah, Tom Savage was definitely right when he said, honestly, there's some things I can't do that Deshaun Watson can. There's a lot of things. Yeah, like be a starting quarterback.
So the Colts are at 3-6 now, while the Texans are at 3-5. So not looking so good for the Texans.
Yeah.
We'll move on from that game. Next game I have is the Bengals and Jags. Bengals lose 7-23. This pushes the Jags to 5-3 and the Bengals to 3-5. Ramsey and AJ Green were both ejected, and the Bengals offense just stalled without AJ.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure why Ramsey got ejected from that game. He pushed AJ Green. It wasn't really enough for an ejection.
They probably just didn't see everything that happened and just assumed they were both involved. So.
Yeah, I understood AJ Green because he put him in a chokehold and body slammed him to the ground. I get that, but
oh yeah,
I don't know about Ramsey getting ejected, but I guess it's just easier that way.
Well, either way, the Jags were able to roll even without Leonard Fournette, who I guess missed the team picture as well as a couple other meetings.
Yeah, he missed a couple of things.
Doug Marrone was like, well, this is what happens. I guess he's trying to instill a culture to that locker room, which, they won, so it doesn't look like a bad move.
Right.
But
yeah.
So Jags are looking pretty good. The next game I had was the Bucks and the Saints. The Bucks lose 10-30, pushes the Saints up to 6-2, and the Bucks down to 2-6. Thanks to Kamara having 172 yards from scrimmage, and just the Bucks giving up in general. They're
a mess.
They're in full tank mode.
Yeah, Winston's hurt. Mike Evans gets suspended for super cheap shotting Marshawn Lattimore.
Oh yeah,
that team's just a mess right now.
Yep, Bucks are looking to next year most likely.
Yeah.
So then I have the Giants and the Rams. The Giants got steamrolled.
A little bit, you could say.
51-17 in a game. That final score is like a college football game.
It's like a Madden game, dude. 51-17. Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams offense was just making huge plays left and right. There's nothing the Giants could do to stop them. And the only playmaker that the Giants have that's consistent is Evan Ingram. They have no one else who's consistent. I mean, Tavares King had a touchdown in this game and looked to be getting targeted pretty frequently, but
he has to throw to someone.
It's so inconsistent other than Ingram, because Ingram's their best player right now.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's any bright spot, he's looking really good for a rookie tight end. He's not even really a tight end, really. He's like just a really tall receiver. You know,
yeah, he's like Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, like he's technically a tight end, but he's more of a receiver.
Right. So that pushes the Rams to 6-2, and the Giants down to 1-7. With man, I mean that team is just falling apart too. It's crazy. I mean, there's speculation as of today. There's speculation saying that Ben McAdoo is going to be. Did I say Ben McAdoo? Is that there? Or am I thinking of the basketball player?
Ben McAdoo.
Okay. There's speculation that Ben McAdoo will be getting fired, leaving Spagnuolo to lead the team the rest of the year, as if it really matters. But hopefully he does get fired, because I guess there's been all sorts of reports saying that he's just locker room cancer and throws everybody under the bus and doesn't accept responsibility. You know, things that adults should be doing. Moving on, we had a game with the Broncos and Eagles. The Eagles also steamrolled over the Broncos, which is a little bit more surprising for sure.
Right.
They also scored 51 points, and the Broncos only managed 23 points. The Eagles had a very strong rushing performance and also had great plays from Wentz, as he's doing week in and week out. The Broncos are pretty much hopeless on offense, though. I will say, though, Brock does show more awareness. He has much better pre-snap read as far as when they're going to be running a play, like especially a running play. He does see the defense. If he got anything out of Peyton Manning, it was his ability to do pre-snap reads. And watching that game, I saw him make a lot of pre-snap reads and a lot of protection adjustments, and that was encouraging to see. He just doesn't have the talent to match the mental game.
Yeah, you'd hope a guy that was under Peyton Manning for years would have the mental capacity to at least be productive at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he just doesn't have the talent.
Yeah, he doesn't have the arm talent. He doesn't have just that innate throwing ability that Peyton Manning has, which, I mean, nobody really does.
Right, not many people do have that innate throwing ability that he does.
But still, at least he's picked up that. I mean, he looked better than Simeon, or at least more comfortable than Simeon. He just doesn't have the arm talent to make those plays.
Right.
So that is unfortunate for him. The Broncos moved down to 3-5, and the Eagles sitting at 8-1.
Oh, yeah.
Eagles are looking good.
They're looking good, and they're going to continue to look good till someone decides to give them a loss.
Yep.
Which will be in Week 13.
Well,
when Seattle plays against them.
I hope so. So, next game up was the Ravens versus the Titans. The Ravens dropped this one 20-23. I mean, the Titans were really able to win this one thanks to their opportunistic defense.
Yeah.
A couple of good interceptions, and really just played or took advantage of every opportunity that they were given. And the Ravens just couldn't get going on offense. They struggled until the final quarter. And at that point, I'm sure most of the Titans players had thought the game was well out of reach or well out of hand, and proved to be. So that's not really a whole lot to say about that game. Titans are sitting at 5-3 now, so they're tied record-wise with the Jags, and now it's just a two-way race at the top to win that division between the Titans and Jags.
I still say that with a healthy Mariota, they're going to win the division. I don't see the Jags offensively being able to keep up all year.
I think they can. I think the Jags look like a much better team than the Titans.
I like the Titans more. Just I like their defense is obviously not as good. The Jags have a great defense right now, but I just don't trust Blake Bortles when it comes down to playing against good teams. I don't trust him. It's like,
yeah, I mean, I hear you. It's hard to trust him, but he's been playing decent this year. His interception percentage has gone down. I think it's sitting at a 2.1 interception percentage, which is, for example, Russell Wilson's at a 2% interception percentage based on his throws. So he's playing efficiently. He's doing what he's been asked to do, and he probably won't really have to do a whole lot while the running game has been so potent for them. I mean, they have Leonard Fournette, but Chris Ivory and T.J. Yeldon have both played really well. So I don't really see them needing to rely on Blake Bortles as much.
I mean, in an ideal situation, yeah, you'd like to be able to just, do the 2012, 2013 Seattle scheme of just give it to your great running back, let your great defense, keep the other team from really pulling away with any sort of lead. But it's not the same.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens the rest of the year. I just don't trust Blake Bortles yet. I want to see how he finishes the season when all of a sudden these games start meaning more and more to teams, and he has to really step it up.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes for him. But yeah, there is a pretty good race going on. That's going to be a fun one to watch the rest of the year. Next game I have is the Cardinals versus the 49ers. The Cards win 20-10. The Cards are now sitting at 4-4, and the Niners are still winless at 0-9. Really, the Cards were able to win this game thanks to Peterson, of course. He had a career-high 37 carries for 159 yards, and Drew Stanton didn't play just downright terrible, which is encouraging to see. I mean,
yeah,
he didn't play great. He only completed 50% of his passes, but he had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, and didn't seem to be reserved in his throwing. I mean, the first play of the game was like a 50-yard completion to John Brown, which was You like to see those deep shots. It's good for for his confidence, whether or not that translates to a good play or not. At least he seems confident making those plays. Hopefully he can put together something for them. 49ers are just still bad.
I thought they were going to win this game. I thought that without Carson Palmer and just with that bad offensive line that the Niners could finally take advantage and, pull out a win, but C.J. Beathard's not very good, and their defense can't stop anyone. So
yeah, Beathard has no pocket awareness. I mean, he was sacked, I think, 5 times, and every time I watched the highlight reels, and it was like every time the Niners were on offense, it was a highlight reel for the defense doing something good,
right?
And they can't keep him upright. And I think that's part of the reason they're not letting Jimmy Garoppolo just go out there yet. I'm sure that they will soon, but for now, they're just going to see what they have in Beathard, keep him as the starter for now. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I see Jimmy Garoppolo, if he's going to play at all, only a couple games this year. I don't think it's going to be very much. I think they'll just kind of let him get a feel for the scheme a little bit and game action before the season's over. But I don't see Garoppolo coming in.
I'm pretty sure the plan is to just let him get accustomed to the scheme and then franchise tag him because they have all the cap space in the world to do that. And I think that when I looked at the at the numbers, it was $24 million for the franchise tag. So I mean, that's a big chunk of change. But for the Niners,
when you're not paying anyone else anything, you have the money. Like, it's just like the Browns last year, dude. Going into this year of free agency, this last year of free agency, they had over $100 million in cap space. Like, it was ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
So it's the Niners are definitely going to be okay spending $24 million on a guy to see what he's got. You know?
Yeah, to see if he's possibly your franchise quarterback, and I think based on what he's shown, it's worth the risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if he can perform even 75% of what Matt Ryan was able to do under Kyle Shanahan. If he can do 75% of that, boom, instant franchise quarterback for them. So, we'll see how the rest of the year plays out for the Niners. For now, they're still winless and look to continue to be winless, barring some miracle play. Next game up I have is the Chiefs and Cowboys game. The Chiefs lost this one 17-28, pushing them down to 6-3, while the Cowboys are sitting at 5-3. I mean, really, this just came down to Kansas City's defense being unable to stop the Cowboys. Their defense looked very good at the start of the year, and they've been showing some weaknesses, especially at cornerback outside of Marcus Peters. Yeah. And secondary pretty much outside of Marcus Peters.
Yeah, I think that loss of Eric Berry has really done a number on them. Because Marcus Peters, he's fine. Terrence Mitchell's okay, but they really need a complementary third corner in that scheme because they don't have one. And it doesn't work.
I'm taking my duck glasses off, and I'm going to tell you right now that Terrence Mitchell is really bad. I love Terrence Mitchell, and I think it's great that he went from being a 7th round pick to now a starting cornerback for a great team. And I have a special place in my heart for him because he's a Duck, and I love rooting for underdogs. But he is just not good. He'd be serviceable as a number 3 corner for that team.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking is like they need another corner that can actually help out that secondary because it's putting too much pressure. It's similar to the situation in Arizona where you have Patrick Peterson, and then I'll take Terrence Mitchell every day of the week and a million times on Sunday over Justin Bethel because Bethel is absolute hot garbo. But it's a similar situation where you have a stud on one side and a guy that they're going to pick on the rest of the time, and when you don't have a safety that can help take the pressure off of that corner, you start falling apart. And that's exactly what's happening to the Chiefs. Eric Berry helped take that pressure off, and that helped Terrence Mitchell. So now, with Daniel, I think that's his name, Daniel Sendejo, is there...
I don't even know.
Exactly. We don't even know who's in there now, so it just shows that secondary is going to continue to struggle, and I think the Chiefs offensively will be fine the rest of the year, but that defense has to get some more stops because it's just you're just running right through them.
Definitely needs to step it up. Only other notable thing, or the most notable thing, was that Alex Smith threw his first interception of the year, which is pretty crazy, honestly. 9 games in, and you throw 1 interception. That's not bad.
After throwing 20 touchdowns,
yeah, not bad.
Those are MVP numbers, dude.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I said, Cowboys are at 5-3 now. Chiefs are sitting at 6-3. So Cowboys are looking like a possible sneaky wild card if they can keep it up the rest of the year, as long as Zeke doesn't get suspended.
But even with Zeke suspended, they have good running backs to replace him for that stretch of games.
Sure.
I think the bigger struggle is if he gets the entire last chunk of the season suspended by the time it actually hits him. Because then that race to the playoffs, you don't have possibly your best player.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's only 2 games until that final stretch. I mean, we're going into week 10. And then there's only 7 more weeks. However, I was reading that I guess in Roger Goodell's original suspension notice, or whatever you want to call it, I don't really know. His original statement said that he would be suspended, specifically it says, for 6 regular season games. So I think that Zeke's lawyers are going to argue that they won't be allowed to suspend him through the playoffs.
Okay.
So that bodes really well for the Cowboys. But yeah, and the Chiefs, I think that they'll be just fine. They're definitely far and away the best team in their division, and definitely in the best spot for their division right now.
Right.
Raiders are looking better, but not by much.
Yeah, it's so weird because going into the season, we were talking about that division as being the best in football.
Yep.
And now it's like, man, like they're struggling.
Yeah,
pretty hard.
Broncos have face planted the past 5 weeks. The Chargers have been up and down all year.
Yeah.
The Raiders are more of the same, up and down. The Chiefs are really the only one that looks like a solid contender. Speaking of the Raiders, the next game I had on my list was the Raiders and Dolphins. The Raiders win this one 27-24, moving them up to 4-5 and bringing the Dolphins down to 4-4. The Dolphins still don't have a running game, even though they got rid of Jay Ajayi, who maybe they thought was part of the problem. And to really illustrate that point, they don't even have a rushing touchdown this year.
Yeah, and they have a touchdown from a running back, but it wasn't a rushing touchdown. So,
right.
I don't know what. Miami's kind of screwed right now.
Yeah,
don't have a lot
I think
going
they
for
know
them.
that. Jay Cutler had his best game as a Dolphin. He threw for 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, which is rare for Jay Cutler. Hopefully they can get a running game going, because if Jay Cutler can play like that, stay acclimated to the system, they could get rolling on offense. Their defense isn't great, but it's definitely not the worst defense.
No.
It's probably about middle of the pack, I would say, without bringing up any stats or anything like that. Just from what I've watched, they definitely don't seem like the worst defense, especially considering they have the worst offense and they're sitting at 4-4. Their defense must be doing something right if they're able to have a 500 record. And they only lost this game by 3 points, so there's that for them. And then the last game I have was the Monday night game with the Lions and Packers. Lions win this one 30-17, bringing the Lions and Packers both to 4-4. Matt Stafford is the best quarterback left in that division now, and he looked really good.
Mm-hmm.
Brett Hundley is probably the worst quarterback in that division now, and he looked really bad.
Yeah, Brett really struggled in that game. In fact, the Packers in general were just awful in that game. Just the entire team was bad. And they got, Detroit manhandled them, dude.
Oh yeah, Marvin Jones had 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Had a great game.
They couldn't stop the Lions on offense. They didn't have to punt the entire night.
Golden Tate had over 100 receiving yards.
Yep. It was a massacre. And the score may not look like it was a massacre, but it was bad. Oh man.
Absolutely. But, things are finally at the point, after the halfway point, you can kind of tell how the rest of the year is probably going to go for most teams. Or at least you can project with better accuracy than you can through the first quarter of the season. Because there's always going to be teams that start their, downfall a little later than others. After the first quarter of the season, if you had told me that the Broncos were going to fall apart like they had, I wouldn't have believed you. They looked good on defense, and even in this before this game with the Eagles, they were the number 1 defense in yardage. I'm pretty sure. They still do have a great defense. Their offense is just so bad now, and watching the fall of some of these teams is sad to watch. It's inevitable, though. There's always going to be teams that start strong and finish terrible. I don't know, like what team do you see sliding this year that has looked good up until this point?
What team do I see sliding from like here on out?
Yeah, from this point, it's a little bit past the halfway mark of the season, and we're coming up on week 10. There's about 8 games left. What team do you think that looks good right now that will slide towards the end of the year and may possibly fall out of playoff contention? Or
Well, there's a couple that I have in mind. And the thing is, like, there's so many teams that are like, I mean, you just don't know. Even at this point, it's still kind of hard to tell where they're going to go because, like, just historically, they just haven't they haven't been able to really put together those, like, championship caliber seasons. The first one that comes to mind is the Bills. I just don't know if they're going to be able to keep it up the rest of the year. They're doing all right now, but the lack of... We'll see what happens with the addition of Kelvin Benjamin. We'll see how much of a significant impact that he actually makes. But I just don't know
if they can sustain it.
Yeah, I don't know if they can sustain it. Again, it's like that. It's what I was saying earlier about being able to, like with the Jaguars, being able to beat teams when the games really start to matter more. That's what I want to be able to see out of the Bills. If I can see that, I think they'll be okay, but I just, talent-wise, I just think they might get bullied, you know? But we'll see what happens. They have some really good pieces, and they've been solid so far, but that's definitely my first pick as far as who would slump. Who do you think?
Well, right now, the playoff picture is looking like this. For the AFC, there's Pittsburgh and New England at the top at the 1 and 2 seed, followed by Kansas City, Tennessee, Jacksonville, and Buffalo. So, that's for right now. The Pittsburgh and New England are sitting at 6 and 2, Kansas City 6 and 3, and then Tennessee, Jacksonville, and Buffalo are all 5 and 3. I think you're correct in your assessment of Buffalo being suspect of falling out of that. But the rest of the teams in the AFC just don't look that great. I think they could probably squeeze in just because this is a weak year for the AFC, I feel like.
And that was kind of why I was tentative to say that they're going to slump completely out of playoffs. I think they're going to slump as far as their win-loss goes towards the end of the year. But,
sure.
I mean, the playoffs, yeah. I mean, without any real, like, threat, because at the beginning of the year, it was like, oh, the AFC West is just going to, like, you know, they might have 3 teams in the playoffs, you know, but now, with all of those teams probably not making the playoffs, save the Chiefs, the Bills could probably get in there without any real huge competition.
Well, here's the next 4 teams. There's the Miami Dolphins, the Baltimore Ravens, the Oakland Raiders, and the New York Jets. After that, everybody is 3 and 5 or worse. The only team that I could see maybe pulling out a wild card spot would be Oakland. If they catch fire towards the end of the year here, they could make a playoff push and push Buffalo out if Buffalo struggles. As far as the NFC goes, the top 6 right now is Philadelphia, of course, in the 1 seed, followed by New Orleans in the 2, Minnesota in the 3, Rams in the 4, followed by Carolina and Dallas. Out of those 6 teams, the only team I could really see sliding is Carolina because I really think that they have gotten lucky. They're always a team that gets lucky with some of their wins, or plays a team that doesn't play very well against them, whatever it may be. They have a great defense, so I'll give them that, and they have a good rushing attack, but I could see them slumping only because their offense might get a little too predictable.
And I wouldn't even really call it a great rushing attack. I mean, they had a good game against Atlanta, but there were so many games this year that the rushing game was almost non-existent. It was like Jonathan Stewart would have 11 carries for 20 yards. Like, you don't have a lethal rushing attack. If they can build off of what they did against Atlanta, then yeah, they'd have a great rushing attack. But I wouldn't call it too good at this point. I would agree that Carolina is probably going to slump out of that playoff picture. I haven't looked at their schedule for the rest of the year, so I'm not entirely sure the strength of the rest of that schedule. But just based on what we've seen from them this year, it's that defense is having to work pretty hard, and the offense is really inconsistent. So,
actually, based on the rest of their season, they have to play the Dolphins this week, and then they play the Jets, the Saints, the Vikings, the Packers, the Bucks, and the Falcons. So their last 3 games of the year are all winnable games against the Packers, the Bucks, and the Falcons. Those are all games that they can win. Their hardest games are going to be the Vikings and Saints, but they could see themselves at least in a wild card spot. But if I was going to pick a team to slump in the NFC, man, I mean, Carolina for sure, but I could also see even Minnesota slumping, because right now they're sitting at 6-2, but they're not a very good 6-2. I mean, I don't trust Keenum to lead them through the rest of the year or into the playoffs. He's not a playoff quarterback, and Bridgewater has been out for quite a while now. It's going to probably take him some time to get back to playing form. His leg might be healthy and he might be ready to go, but it's going to take a minute to get back into the groove of things. And I don't know if and this is all speculation. I love the Vikings. I think they're a great team, and I don't see a slump like they're going to lose out the rest of the year, but just that they could potentially lose their division to the Lions, who are a team that is up and coming and seems to be a dark horse to take that division for sure.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and the Lions, I think, have a great shot right now to really make a push for the NFC North title there. I just don't see the Vikings slumping that hard solely because that defense has been so good this year. I mean, it's just that defense has been lights out and they've stayed healthy. And that's been the biggest thing over the last couple of years for the Vikings, is actually keeping their roster healthy. And because that defense has been able to stay on the field and just keep all their players healthy and not on injured reserve, like, that's been huge for them. And it shows this year with how elite they've been. So as far as Keenum goes, I agree with you. He's not a playoff quarterback, and I don't see him really when he's going to have to face, again, just like I was saying earlier, with those games that really, really matter in the playoffs. Is he really going to be able to take them over the top? I don't think so. Now, if Bridgewater can be... If he can get at least like 4 games under his belt, 4 solid games under his belt before the playoffs, I think they'll be better off that way. But, yeah, it's been a while since he's played. Yeah. I mean, it's been over a year, so... I'm not sure what to think, I could see them slumping, and, Detroit's on the rise, but they have no running game, so, it's kind of take your pick right now.
Sure. Other than that, I mean, and it's probably hard to slide more than they have, but the Falcons right now are sitting 4-4, but they just have not looked good, and they've taken a step back on both sides of the ball, both on offense and on defense. They're
more offensively.
definitely more offensively, which impacts the defense and how well they're able to play. So defense has not has not taken a step forward like people were hoping, and the offense has definitely fallen further behind than what most people were hoping for. So I could see them, I think finishing at 500 would be good for them. If they can go 4-4 the rest of the year, that would be, I feel like that's kind of best case scenario for them right now. They've shown enough to show us that they're not the same team offensively that they were when Kyle Shanahan was calling the offensive plays, and that their defense isn't good enough to make up for that.
Right. Yeah, 500 would definitely be a good sign for them just moving forward, being like, okay, we had Sarkisian in as our offensive coordinator, who is a terrible offensive coordinator, and they can still go 8-8 with a terrible offensive coordinator. I think there's some positive signs there. They need to get rid of Sarkisian immediately after the season's over because he has been bad. Just his play calling is so predictable. It's predictable, and when you have a guy like Julio Jones, you do not give him 4 targets in a game. You give him 10. You give him 12. You give him all of the targets.
Yeah.
And if he's getting double covered, then someone else will be open. But instead, you use him as a decoy, and you're like, I'm going to throw it to Mohamed Sanu and Levine Toilolo. It's like, what are you doing? Like, where's the thought in that? Let's draw up plays for our second string tight end. Like, you can do that here and there, like, because teams are focusing so hard on these other guys, but they're not. They're just playing their normal defense because it's such a predictable scheme that Sarkisian's running there.
Oh yeah, it's because he's been calling plays for college football the last few years. Last year he was an offensive assistant or something like that for the Falcons. Like, he's been in their coaching rooms, but before that he was calling plays for college football and
for Alabama, who literally just run the ball like 40 times a game.
Yeah, who is far and away usually the best team, or has the most talent of any college football team. So it's not that hard to look successful.
Right.
But his scheme is predictable, and it's, I'm sure, very easy to read for other defenses. And that's why they're going to keep struggling, because he's not creative. Shanahan, the reason why he was able to have the success that he did was because his system is so complex and so intricate. There's different options on every play. There's not this play is designed for just Julio, or this play is designed for just this guy. It's the plays that he calls were depending on what the safety does, this guy will be open or this guy will be open. And Matt Ryan, you're smart enough to choose. And when he was able to execute at that high level with Shanahan, he put up MVP numbers. You don't just go from being an MVP quarterback to mid-level quarterback in one season because your talent drops off like that, especially at his age.
Especially when you retain pretty much your entire offense in the offseason. That has to do with coaching.
Yep, that's all coaching. So I could see Atlanta. This is a whole season-long slide for them. But, hopefully they can get their offensive coordinator addressed this coming off season and become playoff contenders like they were. It'd be awesome to see, because I like the Falcons, and I know you do. So it would be good to see. But man, it's other than that, most of the teams are looking pretty steady.
Especially in the NFC,
a lot of teams are looking up. Right now, Seattle's at the number 7 spot so they're the first one out for playoffs, but I think we're going to see that change.
They'll be in there.
They've already beat the Rams once, who are just rolling like crazy. If they can win another game, their other game with the Rams, they're gonna win that division. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna win both our games against the Niners. The Cards are a different story because you never know with the Cardinals.
Yep.
And you never know with the Rams, which is why I'm saying if they can win that game, then they win the division easily. And then they'll, of course, be in a playoff spot. But even if they can't beat the Rams, if they can at least win all the rest of their division games and not drop any out-of-division games, other than maybe one or two more this year, if we can go 11-5, we'll be looking at the playoffs.
Yeah. It's because I was going to say the team that I could see falling out is the Cowboys, just because that defense is a liability, and they're not super explosive. They're very just like by the book pro style offense. So it's not like a lot of like crazy stuff. Like last year with the Falcons, it was like you never knew what play was going to go off for 65 yards and a touchdown. It would just happen out of nowhere. The Cowboys are just 12-yard completion, 4-yard run, 16-yard completion. It's just kind of the chunks here, the little chunks here. Nothing like crazy to worry about. You don't have any receivers that really threaten you too much. So I could see the Cowboys slumping, and because the Seahawks will be in there. Seattle is not going to miss the playoffs, especially with how their team has been playing this year, with the O-line improving every week and Russell Wilson going nuts. I mean, it's just there's no way they're missing the playoffs, especially with the rest of their schedule this year. I could see them losing to Jacksonville, maybe. Like the rest of them are absolutely winnable.
For sure. Yeah, we'll see what happens the rest of the year for Seattle, but I definitely see them also being in the playoffs, even without my own bias.
Right.
They're a team that's looking up. They don't look like they're sliding. They look like they're looking up. And yes, they lost this game against the Redskins, and it was a very sloppy loss. It was sloppy on both sides of the ball. I don't really know why. But if they can cut down their penalties, they should be fine. The problem is we're just the most penalized team in the league, and that seems to happen a lot. But last time we were the most penalized team in the league, we won a Super Bowl. So
I'll take it.
Maybe they don't fix that. Who knows? But anyways, we can move along forward to our last segment here.
Well, before we do that, what's your final NFC and AFC? Your final, what do you think is going to happen? End of the year. What are your predictions for standings?
Oh man, end of the year. Okay, so I think division-wise for AFC East, New England, of course, will win that division.
Just like playoff seeding. What do you think the seeds are going to be?
Oh, well, it's hard to say because the seedings depend on who is a division winner and and then from there it's like the team who has the best record for the wild card spot. For AFC, I don't really see much of a change up in what it is right now, which is I think by the end of the year that the Patriots will be the number 1 seed. Mm-hmm. Their defense has started to play better. They're starting to mesh now. I think Kansas City will be the number 2 seed, followed by Pittsburgh at 3. And then the winner between Tennessee and Jacksonville for the AFC South will be the number 4 seed. Right now, I'm going to pencil in Jacksonville, but I could easily see Tennessee taking that spot instead. And then I personally think that Oakland is going to make a push into the playoffs.
Okay.
I think that they're going to be able to get rolling offensively, maybe shore up that defense just a little bit and squeak out a wild card spot.
Okay.
So that's my top 6. I have New England, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, Tennessee, and then Oakland.
Okay. So I guess I'll do my AFC. I think New England is first. I think Pittsburgh actually ends up second, just barely. Then Kansas City, and then I think the Titans win the division. And then I think the Jaguars still make the playoffs, just because there's not much other competition in that division. And with the lack of really good AFC teams, I think the Jags can get into the wild card. And then the other wild card, I'm not really sure. For me, it's between... I think Miami has a shot to squeak in that last one because there's not a lot of competition.
Sure.
But I do think I would probably say the Raiders have a better shot at getting that last wild card spot.
Yeah, and unfortunately we're both kind of writing off the Bills. But yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. I don't know if they can sustain their success that they've had so far this year. I think they're looking at maybe 9 wins, maybe 10, but I don't think that'll be enough to put them into a wild
We'll
card.
see. We'll see what happens. I think the Bills have a shot. I just don't trust them. They haven't had success in over 10 years. More than that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just been so long since the Bills have had success. I don't know if this is the year that they turn that around.
Yeah, especially from what it was people were thinking at the beginning of the year.
Right.
Like, thinking they were going to be really bad. Especially because they were making a lot of trades to kind of what seemed like tank. But
Yeah, they've definitely overachieved so far.
So for the NFC, I definitely see Philadelphia taking the number 1 seed. Obviously, they're 8-1 right now. Don't really seem to have any competition other than the Cowboys in their division, but
Right.
they're not gonna contend with the Eagles if we're being honest. From there, it gets kind of tricky.
Yep.
I think so. Right now, there's New Orleans in the number 2 spot. I think that they could stay there if they keep if they keep sustaining what they've been doing. They can keep that spot because I don't think the Panthers will sustain what they're doing. The Falcons have looked suspect, and the Bucks are just terrible this year. So Their division isn't too bad. I think that they can, based on how they're playing this year, I think that they can definitely pull out this division and end up with a very high seed. However, I'll put them in there at number 2 for now.
Okay.
I'll put New Orleans at number 2 in the NFC for now. And then I think that the Minnesota Vikings are going to concede that number 3 spot to the Rams.
Okay.
The Rams have looked really good. Like I said, it's going to come down to between what happens with Seattle and the Rams in that last game. That's going to be the telling tale. But I think that the Rams have looked really good on both sides of the ball, especially on offense.
Right.
I think that they can get that number 3 spot pretty easily. Minnesota could stay in the number 4 spot. However, I'm gonna take the Lions to win out and take that division. I think that they could take that number 4 spot from the Vikings.
Okay.
The Vikings, they started out really, really well, and they've slowly each week kind of looked a little bit worse, I feel like. I think that they are still a very good team and could win the division, but I really like the offense that the Lions have, and their defense is good enough to help them out. I would love to see the Lions finally, without Aaron Rodgers, without the Vikings having an answer at quarterback, I'd love to see Matt Stafford put this team on his back and win this division. That's what he needs to do to really prove that he is among the elite quarterbacks of this league. So So yeah, I'll put the Lions at number 4. Minnesota will drop down to 5, and Seattle will end up with I think the final wild card spot if they're unable to win that division. Otherwise, it'll be flipped with the Rams.
Okay. So, NFC wise, I somewhat agree. I think the Eagles will undoubtedly have the 1 seed. It's hard to say they won't at this point. The 2 seed... The 2 seed is the hardest one for me, because I just don't know.
The winner of the NFC West could be in the number 2 seed.
That's why I'm kind of struggling. I think just... Because here's my struggle with the Rams. Rams are 6-2 right now. Here's the rest of their schedule: Houston, Minnesota, New Orleans, Arizona, Philadelphia, Seattle, Tennessee, San Francisco. That's a hard end to the year.
Oh yeah.
You face Philadelphia, Seattle, Tennessee, and New Orleans and Minnesota. That's 5 games that are all losable games. That could put you at 9-7 for the year. Now, do I think the Rams are going to lose all those games? Probably not. They've been pretty good, but their defense has had some issues, and you can't take this last week as a real, good sample, because you're going against the Giants that are garbage anyways. So when you really break it down, they're having to rely on their offense. So I think that this game against Minnesota coming up in week 11, I think they lose that game, because Minnesota's defense has been so good. Now,
I don't think it'll be that bad.
It's driving me nuts.
Well, to be fair, we didn't tell him.
I know, but we didn't tell him last week, and he was fine last week.
Yeah, oh well.
What was I saying? Oh, they're going to lose Minnesota. How do I transition back into this? With all that talent, with Harrison Smith, and that secondary is so good, and that D line is so good. I don't know how we see the Rams really take down all of those teams and keep that high record. I think that Seattle has a much more favorable schedule the rest of the year, but it could kind of go both ways. I personally see if I have to make a pick right now, I'm saying Seattle. That's not biased. It's simply because
for
of
the
scheduling.
Division or for
the number 2 seed.
Oh, okay.
Because I think that the competition between the Vikings and the Lions is going to be pretty big, but I don't think they're either on the same level as that competition between the Rams and the Seahawks right now. So I know people are going to be like, you're a Seahawks fan, so of course you're going to put them at the 2 seed, but
I'm sure we're going to have hundreds of complaints.
All those 3 viewers are really going to be mad at me, but here's the thing. This is Seattle's schedule, okay? You have Arizona, Atlanta, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Jacksonville, the Rams, Dallas, and Arizona again. So not a piece of cake, cupcake schedule, but Arizona is not a huge threat. San Francisco is not a threat at all. Dallas is... We'll see. We'll see what happens with that game. I'm not personally too worried about that game, but their pass rush is okay. The Rams is going to be a good game. Jacksonville, Philadelphia. Those 3 games in a row, Philadelphia, Jacksonville, and the Rams, are the most concerning. But the one I'm worried about the most is Philadelphia. The rest of them, Seattle has proven they can beat. So I can kind of see them taking that 2 seed. Now from there, because the Rams can't be the 3 or 4 at that point, I have the Rams at the 5. Now at the 3 and the 4, still kind of tricky. I think the Saints end up getting the 3 spot because they don't have a lot of competition in that division. If Carolina comes alive, then maybe that changes, but I see Carolina slumping. So I think New Orleans takes the 3 seed. In the 4 seed, I'm going to give to the Vikings just because I like their defense a lot. I think that the Lions will end up being the better team in the playoffs. I just think the Vikings have such a good start right now that they're not going to drop that many more games and slump out of the division lead. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I hear you.
And as far as the last spot goes, number 6, yeah, I mean that's actually all of them. It'd be Detroit and the Rams in the 5 and 6. So
I mean, Detroit's only 2 games behind Minnesota right now, so it might be insurmountable at this point in the season only because of Minnesota's defense going to be able to keep them in games. Because the Lions, after this, play they play the Browns, the Bears. They'll play the Vikings, which is going to be pivotal.
Mm-hmm.
If they can win that game, then it gets a little easier for them. They play the Ravens after that, the Buccaneers, the Bears, the Bengals, and the Packers. They have a pretty easy schedule outside of just the Vikings. That's going to be really their biggest challenge is the Vikings and maybe the Ravens, who have a pretty stout defense.
Yeah, so we could see them go 10 and 6, and
they only need they'd have to lose 2 games out of these 2. The only games I could see them losing is a game against the Vikings and the Ravens.
Yeah, the rest of them they should win.
Yeah, they play the Browns, the Bears twice, and then the Buccaneers and the Bengals. The Buccaneers are one of the worst teams in the league, and the Bengals are one of the worst teams in the league. And the Packers are without Aaron Rodgers, so...
Yeah, and meanwhile, I mean, the Vikings do have to play Washington, the Rams, the Lions, the Falcons, the Panthers, Cincinnati, Green Bay, and Chicago. So
they have a much tougher schedule the rest of the year than the Lions do, for sure.
So it is quite possible that the Lions do take over that division with the strength of the schedule difference there.
Well, now that we've thought pretty far ahead, why don't we get into our matchups for just this next week?
Sure.
We'll see how what the matchups are, and
well, let's start with Thursday night, tomorrow night's game, Seattle and Arizona. That is at Arizona, so we'll keep that in mind. But I think we both are going to have Seattle in this one simply because, Drew Stanton, when you can just load the box and force Drew Stanton to throw against a great secondary, odds are you're going to win. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, really, they all the Seahawks have to do to win this game is limit Adrian Peterson. If they can do that, they'll be fine.
And they have to stop a pass rush that really isn't that much of a pass rush. So
it's really just Chandler Jones and the rest of them.
Right. And when Chandler Jones is coming off the edge where Dwayne Brown is, I think we'll be okay. So I definitely see the Seahawks coming away big on this one.
Absolutely. It's definitely taking the Seahawks on this one. The next game is going to be the Saints and Bills. Saints are at 6-2 and Bills are at 5-3. I'm going to take the Saints because they have more firepower offensively and because their defense has been playing lights out, especially in the secondary.
Yeah, which is weird to say because New Orleans defensively has been so bad the last couple of years, but Marshawn Lattimore has been
That was more
nuts.
thanks to Rob Ryan.
Right.
Being terrible.
He's terrible, but nonetheless, Marshawn Lattimore has been an absolute shutdown corner. And when he's going against a guy like Kelvin Benjamin that he's already played against this year, he already has experience, and Kelvin Benjamin's learning a new system. I agree. I think the Saints take this game. Now, I'm curious to see if they stop LaShawn McCoy, because LaShawn McCoy is going to want to come back big after a pretty disappointing week last week. And Tyrod Taylor's no slouch. So he's getting Charles Clay back, I think, this week.
He is participating in practice, so we'll see what his status is by Sunday, for sure.
Yeah, so if they come in healthy, it's going to be a good game either way, but I do think the Saints take that game.
Yeah. I would have never thought this would be a good game at the beginning of the year.
Right.
But now it could be a pretty interesting matchup.
Yeah, for sure. Next up, the Packers and the Bears. I feel like this game is just insignificant at this point. You know, the Packers have no shot at
the
anything.
Packers. Yeah, they're supposed to be getting Aaron Rodgers back towards the end of the year. However, if they can't win any games without him,
right,
what's the point of bringing him back if you're not going to be making the playoffs?
Right.
So this is an important game for the Packers because it's in division and they really need a win. They need at least 2 wins to stay alive and have Aaron Rodgers come back to hopefully lead them to a wild card spot or a division spot. But this is actually, I think, an important game for the Packers. But the Bears, I'm going to take the Bears on this
I am too.
Brett Hundley has shown nothing that shows that he is capable of being a starter in the NFL. And the Bears have a great rushing game. They have a great rushing game, which is something that the Packers struggle to deal with.
Their defense is bad in general for the Packers.
Yeah.
So until the Packers defense can show up, they're not going to win any more games. Because even a guy like Trubisky can throw 9 passes in a game and still win because he has Jordan Howard to lean on.
Yep.
So I'm definitely taking I think maybe for the first time this year, I'm taking the Bears.
Well, the Bears are favored for the first time against the Packers since 2008. So
yeah,
they're being favored by lots of people. I don't think this is much of a surprise now, other than it's just kind of interesting to think about the Bears being favored over the Packers. But the next game after that is Lions and Browns. Obviously, we're going to take the Lions on that one.
Not much to say there.
Steelers and Colts. Going to take the Steelers there.
Yep, not much to say there again.
Not much to say there. Chargers and Jaguars. The Jags have been playing really well so far. The Chargers have been streaky. They've lost a few in a row, and then they won 3 in a row, and then just dropped one against the Patriots.
Yeah.
This is a game I'm not too sure about. I could see the Chargers maybe pulling something off. You never know.
It's possible.
It's definitely possible.
They're good. They're pretty good offense. I worry that they're not going to be able to get anything consistently in the passing game because of that pass rush and their bad offensive line. It's going to be hard to keep Philip Rivers upright, and when you have great corners in Jacksonville, they're going to be pressing your receivers and forcing you to just make a decision before you're even sure about that decision. It's going to be a tough day for them. So I personally see the Jaguars winning this one.
If the Chargers want to win, they need to get Melvin Gordon going in the run game.
Yeah, and the passing game. They need because the Jaguars do allow receiving yards to running backs, and Melvin Gordon has proven that he can get receiving yards as a running back. So
if they can definitely set up some design screenplays to get Melvin Gordon outside of the area where those really talented defensive linemen are coming through. If they can get him outside and maybe lined up against some linebackers or some safeties and corners, he'll be able to do just fine there. It's really going to be running in between the tackles that's hard for them. I'm going to pick the Jags just because they've played really solid so far, and I don't know if the Chargers have a run defense strong enough to stop Leonard Fournette. So I'll pick the Jags on that one.
So the next game up, we have Bengals and Titans. I think this one could go both ways, if I'm being honest, just because I think AJ Green's going to come out, angry because after last week's game against the Jaguars, he had 1 reception, I think, the entire game, and then got ejected. So I think he's going to want to come back big. We'll see if the rest of the Bengals team wants to come out big, but I just trust the Titans more. I think they're going to be able to control the clock with their rushing game a lot more than the Bengals will, and ultimately be able to probably win this game by probably 10 or so.
It's hard to say because the Titans almost gave the Browns a win this year.
Right.
And so it's hard to pick them with confidence, which is why I have Jacksonville winning that division, because it's mostly because of that Cleveland game. If they had played that Cleveland game better and won more confidently, then I would be able to say that I think it's a definite 50-50 toss-up between Jacksonville and the Titans winning that division. But because of that, it shows that they can definitely be a weak team if they don't execute.
Mariota was not 100% in that game. He was fresh off of injury, and he wasn't 100% yet. But they were doing so terribly with Matt Castle that he just was trying to get back as soon as he could.
And I get that. And I still think an 80% Mariota should be wasting on the Browns.
I agree. But, the Browns, believe it or not, are still a professional football team.
I understand.
They're gonna play as hard as they can. And the Titans, they aren't the historically great Packers and Patriots, they don't have this history of being monster teams. So it's gonna happen,
Yeah. I'm gonna take the Titans in this one because the Bengals aren't particularly better on either side of the ball than the Titans. So I'll pick the Titans on this one. I could see AJ Green coming out, being focused, and shredding that secondary that is very suspect.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. I mean, their safety, what's his name? Byard?
Oh, yeah.
He's had 5 interceptions in the last 2 games.
Yeah, he's been pretty good.
They could be starting to mesh together pretty well. But yeah, we'll take the Bengals or the Titans over the Bengals. Then the next game for us is the Jets and Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
Gonna pick the Jets on this one. The Bucks just look miserable right now. They look like a team that has given up hope this year. I don't think that they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna win another game the rest of the year.
I'm kind of on the same page with you. I haven't looked at their schedule much, but they're just a mess, and they can't control themselves at all emotionally. Their leader in Jameis Winston still very immature, sucking his fingers on the sideline, poking people's helmets, and talking crap when he's already injured on the sideline. I mean, it's just they need a true leader.
His actions, though, show the attitude of that entire locker room. It's not just him.
Right.
Because when they are rolling, they showed some good potential last year, there was none of this. There was no big explosions or immaturity from Jameis Winston, but because of how that locker room attitude is, it's being reflected through Jameis Winston because he has a spotlight on him. All he is evidence of what that locker room is like. So, yeah, the Bucks are done this year. I don't think they're going to win another game the rest of the year. I haven't looked at their schedule, but they're not going to be favored in any game they play the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Whereas the Jets, who were supposed to be this crap team, they have played with a lot of heart this year.
I'm sorry. I just looked at the Bucks' remaining schedule. There's no way they're winning another game this year, except for one. Okay, here's the rest of their schedule. The Jets, the Dolphins, the Falcons, the Packers, which is the one I think they could win, Detroit, Atlanta again, Carolina, and the Saints.
Oh, yeah.
They will win maybe one against the Packers.
Maybe. They might win that one. Because who knows, maybe Brett Hundley starts feeling more comfortable and plays at a level where he can beat the Bucks.
Yeah, and by that point, he'll have already 3 more games under his belt. So, Bucks have a bad defense. I mean, it's just... That's the one he could win, but it's at Green Bay, so
yeah,
it's just that's a pretty brutal schedule for them for the rest of the year. So I'm definitely taking the Jets because, as you were saying, they were supposed to be terrible, but as I say every week, Josh McCown is the truth.
The truth,
and he's the man with a plan. And yeah, man, Jets are 4-5, man.
Yeah,
they're not bad.
The AFC East is looking pretty good this year.
Yeah,
I mean the weakest looking team is the Dolphins.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
At this point now, yeah. I mean, the Jets I think have looked a little bit better, honestly, just a little bit. not by much, but
I have more confidence in them.
Yeah, and that's not saying that I think the Dolphins are a bad team. I'm saying that as in, like, it shows how strong that division is right now. That, yes, of course, the Pats are doing their thing. They're top of the division. But the Bills at 5-3, and the Jets at 4-5, and the Dolphins at 4-4. I mean, that's good football, man.
Yeah,
that's good football for that
division.
So, I mean, that's good stuff. But where were we here?
We both take the Jets, is what we're saying.
Both taking the Jets.
Next game is going to be the Vikings and Redskins. I personally like the Vikings in this one just because, as we said before, Seattle beat themselves in that Redskins game. Redskins played pretty bad, but they did enough to win. So,
yeah.
There is something there. We do have to give them credit in the fact that they did end up beating Seattle, and they beat them at home. So that there is something there. But so much of that came down to Seattle making so many mistakes on their part. And the Vikings won't make that many mistakes because they're not Seattle. Seattle does that all the time, you know?
Yeah, Seattle's so jumpy. They're just jumpy, ready to go, just so, like, excited to play. They're like a puppy compared to these other teams that are, like, you know, trained police dogs that aren't gonna do something unless you tell them to. So, yeah, the Vikings can definitely win this game. However, like you said, the Redskins, Kerrigan has been playing very, very well. And the Vikings have a suspect offensive line. It's not the greatest. However, it's not as bad as it was last year.
The right side is still pretty bad, but yeah.
But I'm wondering how the Redskins are going to play this because Diggs is coming back, but Thielen has been their most effective receiver. So do you think that they're going to just... I mean, I really hope that they don't just shadow Diggs with Norman. I don't think that he's gotten that much rep yet that they're going to just shadow him as a for sure number one guy.
Well, Diggs plays a lot more in the slot than Thielen does, and Josh Norman doesn't play in the slot almost at all. So I think Josh Norman will see himself more on Adam Thielen than anyone else. I think Washington's going to play this very similarly to how they played Seattle, but the Vikings are just sound in their defense completely. So when you think about their matchups, you have Xavier Rhodes against Josh Doxson. Xavier Rhodes wins that every week, no matter what. And then you have whoever the Redskins feel like putting in at number 2 for their receiver. Jamison Crowder, maybe. Terrell Pryor sometimes. Like Brian Grant. Like whoever that is, Trey Waynes will cover. They'll be fine. So their matchups on the outside are fine. And then you have speedy linebackers that can keep up with Jordan Reed if he even plays. And if he doesn't, they can keep up with Vernon Davis. So every matchup they need, they have covered on defense there.
The only guy that I think is a complete mismatch for the Vikings is going to be Chris Thompson. Because they are either going to have to cover him with a corner because of how quick he is, or a safety, and I think he wins a matchup on a safety. I do
too.
As great as Harrison Smith is, he's not your typical, like... He's not going to be able to cover a guy like Chris Thompson. He's just not fast enough.
It's like if you put Cam Chancellor on him. Like, exactly. Cam Chancellor is not the guy that's going to cover a speedy running back.
Great against a tight end, but not a speedster like Chris Thompson. And Harrison Smith, great against tight ends. He can cover any tight end that you put him on, but probably not so much against a running back. So I think Chris Thompson has the most upside for that team as far as opportunity and yardage goes. The rest of that team is going to really struggle to do anything. But if they can get him out in space, then they can probably make something happen, because I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball very well against the Vikings. Yeah, up the middle, which is why they have Chris Thompson. So
Yeah, I think ultimately this is just going to come down to who can come out and get a lead. If the Redskins can come out and establish a lead somehow, they could hold on to this game. But if you're going to force Kirk Cousins to lead a comeback against that defense, he'll throw interceptions.
That is a really good point. That's super smart.
Yeah.
That is right on, because the Vikings are not a team that is capable of playing from behind because of their lack of offensive firepower.
Right.
They have a good running game, which is great for when you have a lead and you're trying to take some time off the clock and burn out a defense. But if you get behind and you're just having to pass the whole game, you can't really rely on Keenum to just sling it and win you a game.
Well, and especially against a Washington defense that isn't bad.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a solid, like, kind of middle of the pack defense. It's not. It's something that you can just steamroll over, as you saw last week with Seattle. So, I think the Vikings take this game.
Me too.
But
it's going to be close.
I think it'll be more fun to watch than maybe people are going to give it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we have still a couple more games here. We already talked about Chargers and Jaguars, so we can move to the Texans and Rams. Not much to talk about there. With Deshaun Watson, there would be. With Tom Savage, there's not. So,
and without Whitney Merciless
and J.J. Watt.
J.J. Watt, like that defense.
And I think Jonathan Joseph's out too.
Are you? Oh, wow.
I think he hurt his leg. So,
yeah, they have him on ESPN favored by 12 points.
Yeah. And that's pretty generous for the Texans. I think Rams. I think this might be another blowout for the Rams.
I could see them doing that for sure. Yeah, definitely taking the Rams in this one. Yeah. Next up, we have Cowboys and Falcons. I'm gonna if Zeke plays, I'm taking the Cowboys, because the Falcons defense is not going to be able to stop that running game with Zeke. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Zeke is just on a different level. As great as the other backs on that team are, I mean, if they were really that any better, they would be stealing more than 1 or 2 carries from Zeke. They would be getting more work. So, but Zeke is he's a transcendent talent, and if he's playing, I'm taking the Cowboys for sure. If he's not playing, then I will take the Falcons in this one, because the Cowboys have a bad defense. And I think that this could be the week that you see the Falcons maybe get on track against a team that struggles to defend the pass, not super great against the run. If they can keep a very balanced attack against that Cowboys, keep them on their heels, keep them unsure of what's going to happen, the Falcons could win that one.
Yeah, this is one of those times when I want to just put it aside and say, okay, I think the Cowboys are taking this one. But there's a couple of factors that I can't get over. And one of them is the fact that Dez Bryant might not play at all in this game. He has both a sprained ankle and I think, other leg injury as well. But I know for a fact he has a sprained ankle that he's working through. So without Dez Bryant, that leaves Desmond Trufant and Robert Alford to cover man-to-man Terrence Williams, who also might not play in this game, and Cole Beasley and Bryce Butler. So none of which I'm really that worried about when you're matching speed corners against speed receivers. I'm not too worried about that. And then when it comes to covering a guy like Jason Witten, they have a super fast linebacker in Deion Jones that can keep up with him. So this just feels to me like the game that the Falcons take to try to get back on track here. That's what it feels like to me. However, if Dez Bryant plays, if Ezekiel Elliott plays, I don't have a lot of faith that the Falcons are really going to be able to pull this one out unless they really lock in this week.
I hear that.
But
I feel the same way, man.
So ultimately, I'm gonna say the Falcons, because I really think they need a win right now to keep any sort of confidence going for themselves. But I'm not going to be surprised if the Cowboys win this game.
Yeah, I won't be surprised either. Dan Quinn is a great defensive guy, so he could dial up a good game plan against Zeke and the Cowboys.
Yeah.
But game plan only does you so much if you can't execute it.
Correct. I agree. Then we have the Pooh Fest of the week, the Giants against the 49ers.
One team has to win, remember.
One team does have to win. So, is this the week that we see the Niners actually get a win? Or is this the week that we see the Giants step it up and start to turn their season around and get their second win of the season?
I don't think they're going to turn around their season, but I definitely think I'm going to take the Giants on this one. They just have more talent. They just haven't. They have so much more talent on defense. They're extremely. They outclass the 49ers in defensive talent for sure. Absolutely, hands down. Offensive talent, I mean, isn't necessarily like on another level, but it's definitely something that they're definitely better. Eli Manning is going to be, of course, a better quarterback than Beathard is or Garoppolo is, especially right now. I just don't see the 49ers winning this game, even though the Giants are bad. I just can't. I can't pick the Niners. They haven't won a game. The Giants have at least one game, but that's it.
Yeah, I agree that as bad as Eli Manning is at this point, the Niners are not going to provide that much of a challenge defensively. Now, their defensive line might be able to get some pressure on Eli Manning just because his offensive line isn't very good, but they don't have anyone that can cover anyone. So when you put really bad corners against pretty bad receivers, it's the same thing as putting or starting receivers against starting corners. It's just like kind of they're on equal playing field, and you just see who's not quite as bad in this case. So I'd probably say Evan Ingram has a pretty big game. Other than that, Orleans Darkwa might have a pretty good game rushing.
Yeah, Darkwa has looked all right. And, even last week he looked all right. But against the Rams. But didn't obviously look great by any means. But he also didn't
playing from behind all games. So
exactly.
He's not going to get a lot of carries.
They should have a closer game against the Niners. Niners aren't very good against the run. And I could definitely see Darkwa having a very good day.
Yeah, it's certainly possible.
I'm gonna go with the Giants on this one for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. And then the last two games, first we have the Patriots and Broncos. I mean, look, after what we've seen out of the Broncos, I'm gonna take the Patriots because the Patriots.
Reason not to.
However, I would like to note that the Brock Lobster, did beat the Patriots in 2015 with a very similar crew of talent. So, I mean, it's possible, man. He is the lobster god.
Yeah, who knows? I have no faith in Brock Osweiler. He killed my fantasy team last year. And I'm sure he would, kind of did the same thing this year, honestly. CJ Anderson is worthless because he doesn't have a quarterback that's any good.
Right. Or an offensive line that's really that good. So, yeah, I think we both just go with the Patriots here and move on to our last game of the week, the John Gruden
special.
Yeah, this guy right here, Spider 2 Wide Banana. Not Wide Banana, Y Banana.
His new thing is the turkey hole. Did you see that?
No.
Oh my god, on Monday night, he was saying, all right, the space between the corners and the safeties in a cover 2 zone we call it the turkey hole. And he circled the thing and he goes, and Stafford's throwing these balls right into the Packers' turkey holes, and I thought it was hilarious. Me and Dad were watching it, and it was so funny. We were just joking, thinking it was so funny that he's saying turkey hole over and over again. But I guess a lot of people were mad, like, it's inappropriate. Like,
yeah.
Dude, get over
football.
yourself. Jesus Christ.
Well, either way, in our John Gruden extraordinaire game, we have the Dolphins and the Panthers. I don't want to pick a team in this one. I don't know.
That's because it's because you know the Panthers are probably going to win this game, but you cannot bring yourself to root for the Panthers.
I can't because I have no faith in them. Like, look what the Bears did to them, dude. Okay,
I know.
Like,
the Bears have freaking Jordan Howard though.
Okay, but
Jared
like,
Cohen.
They're the Bears, dude.
Yeah, but
and look how bad Cam Newton was in that game. I don't know.
Take the Dolphins then, dude. You have nothing to lose. It's not like there's any money on this or anybody's going to hold you accountable except for me.
Yeah, I'll just drink a couple brewskis and take the Dolphins in this one.
Take the Dolphins so you don't have to feel conflicted about going against your hatred for anything Cam Newton and Panthers. I'm going to go with the Panthers, though, because the Panthers have a great defense, and
Jay Cutler's about to tear him up, though.
Jay Cutler is not going to have 2 awesome games in a row. It's not going to happen.
Okay, but if I'm being for real, okay, if I'm really being truly objective about this, the Panthers really only have to contain the wide receivers at this point. That's all they have to do. The Dolphins' defense really isn't great. Again, they're kind of middle of the pack. Cam Newton should be able to get something going. They should be able to establish a rushing game. If they do some stuff similar to what they did last week against the Falcons, objectively speaking, they should be fine. I just personally just have a hard time having faith in the offense. Yeah. Their defense will be fine. Their offense is what concerns me.
Yep, I hear you. But I'm still taking the Panthers in this one, but I'm not going to be like disappointed if they lose. I don't really care. I don't particularly like the Panthers either, but I don't hate them more than any team in the league.
Yeah, well, you also don't root for one of their division rivals, so
true.
Yeah, well, that's all the games for the week. Not really that much more to say other than this should be a pretty good week of football.
Yeah,
some pretty interesting games. Some kind of what if matchups kind of thing where you're like, well, who knows what could happen. So on that note, unless you have anything you want to add,
I just really quickly, it's not really on the topic of football, but I just really quickly wanted to say thank you to you for putting in so much time to get these podcasts edited and put out, and you're really doing all the work for that, and I want to let you know that doing this means a lot to me. You know that I'm going through some ridiculous stuff right now, and it's hard to get passionate about anything right now because I have so much energy going into so many different things, and it kind of feels like my life is falling apart, but doing this with you is just great for me. It's like it's an awesome escape to get out of all the happening outside of this room, everything that's happening outside this house, outside of football. It's been wearing on me, so I look forward to this every week, and I think it's great, man. I just wanted to say thank you for making it happen.
Yeah, man, it's fun. I like being able to sit down and talk about football and not have to just think to myself about football.
Yeah, for sure.
That can get frustrating. You're bottling up all this knowledge, and you're like, I have no one to share it with.
So, yeah, dude. I hear that. So yeah. Anyways, we can wrap that up though. I appreciate everyone who's listening to this. Isaiah's really putting in all the hard work. I'm just here as an extra voice to, make it interesting, I guess. But maybe add some insight, which is funny because we both agree on pretty much the same crap most of the time. Anyways, we rarely disagree, but
yeah,
still. But anyways, thank you for listening. Come back next week. We'll have another podcast out, and I'm sure we'll be wrong with some of our predictions, just like every week.
We always are.
But thanks for listening to the football. Oh God! Thanks for listening to the Philbrook Football Podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and good luck, all you fantasy players out there.
Go Hawks.
The Football Philbrook Podcast.